The film kicks off with a bang, literally. A gang of criminals, led by the towering and menacing Sig Gustafson, played with brutish charm by Kevin Durand, storms into a bustling city bank. The crew moves with brutal precision, shouting orders, waving guns, and sending customers and employees scrambling to the floor. The tension rises as Gustafson himself approaches the vault, cracking open a safety deposit box. From inside, he pulls out a mysterious object known only as the PLOT device. A MacGuffin so suspiciously named it almost winks at the audience. But just as the robbers think they've secured their prize, something completely unexpected happens. The front doors creak open, and in walks a little girl in a Girl Scout uniform, complete with pigtails and a box of cookies. The criminals pause, confused. She walks up confidently, stares Gustafson in the eyes, and then pulls off her mask. To everyone's shock, the girl is none other than Detective Frank Drebin Jr., Liam Neeson, son of the late legendary cop Frank Drebin. In an instant, chaos erupts. Still wearing the Girl Scout outfit, Frank launches into an over-the-top fight sequence. He neutralizes the robbers with a mix of slapstick violence and bone-crunching efficiency, flinging one thug through a teller's window, accidentally tossing another while adjusting his pigtails, and even turning a box of Thin Mints into razor-sharp projectiles. One criminal gets taken down with a headbutt so forceful it shatters an ATM machine, while another is accidentally knocked unconscious when Frank's wig flies off and smacks him in the face. The whole scene is equal parts absurd and brutal, setting the exact comedic tone the film promises. Frank, proud of his handiwork, dusts himself off and struts through the chaos, cookies still tucked neatly under one arm. But there's a problem. His aggressive antics, punching, kicking, and outright obliterating suspects, have already put the police squad under heavy scrutiny. A number of the criminals he's arrested, or more accurately hospitalized, are now suing him and the department for excessive force. Back at headquarters, Frank and his loyal partner Captain Ed Hocken Jr., Paul Walter Hauser, face the wrath of Chief Davis, CCH Pounder. The chief lays down the law, reminding Frank that his reckless stunts are costing the department both money and credibility. She orders Frank and Ed to follow the rules to the letter and to keep their body cams on at all times. Frank, of course, isn't thrilled, since rules and restraint are the two things he's worst at. Later, Frank and Ed take a quieter moment to honor their fathers. They visit a memorial joined by the other next-generation detectives, all there to pay tribute to the legends who came before them. Well, all of them except Nordberg Jr., who is notably absent. Frank, standing before his father's name, wishes for a sign that the old man is still watching over him. He even jokes that his dad could show up as something small and simple like an owl perched nearby. Frank and Ed are called to a new crime scene. A man named Simon Davenport, Jason McDonald, has been found dead after his car went off the road and plummeted over a cliff. The authorities suspect it to be a suicide, but Frank is not convinced. As the wreck is examined, Frank carefully searches the interior and discovers a small clue: a matchbook with the image of a tiger printed on the cover. At the same time, Ed notes that Simon has a sister who lives nearby, suggesting they should speak with her to gather more information. While Frank and Ed investigate, the rest of the police crew attempts to remove Simon's wrecked vehicle from the cliffside using a crane. The process resembles an oversized claw machine, but just as the car is lifted, it slips from the claw and crashes back down, leaving the vehicle in even worse condition. Back at the station, Frank is introduced to Simon's sister, Beth Davenport, Pamela Anderson. Upon seeing her, Frank is immediately struck by her appearance. Beth, however, is focused on her brother's death. She firmly believes that Simon would never have taken his own life and fears that he may have been targeted. She points suspicion towards Simon's employer, Richard Kane, Danny Houston, the powerful CEO of a company called Eden Tech. Frank assures Beth that he will continue investigating and promises to update her if he uncovers any information. Frank next attends an event hosted by Kane and his company. The gathering is lavish, and Kane himself personally greets Frank before offering him a private tour of Eden Tech's latest innovations. Among the inventions, Kane demonstrates a device that can increase a man's sperm count showing off the eccentric and bizarre nature of his projects. As the tour continues, Frank questions Cain about Simon. Cain avoids giving any clear answers, changing the subject and downplaying Simon's role in the company. While speaking, Frank notices that Cain lights a cigar using a matchbook featuring the same tiger symbol as the one he discovered in Simon's wrecked car. When Frank asks about it, Cain casually explains that it is from a nightclub he owns called Bengal. After Frank departs, Cain discreetly gives orders to one of his men. He wants Frank distracted and sends him a supposed gift, an advanced smart car produced by Eden Tech. When Frank gets behind the wheel, chaos follows. He accidentally activates the car's features and loses control, tearing apart an entire row of charging stations before crashing through a wall at the nearby prison. In the process, several inmates gain the opportunity to escape. Frank later joins Ed and Detective Barnes, Liza Koshy, to interrogate one of the bank robbers, played by Busta Rhymes. They begin by reviewing security footage from the robbery. At first, the footage is mostly mundane, or rather chaotic, showing Frank eating chili dogs in the middle of the bank, then urgently rushing to find a bathroom. At one point, he draws his gun and fires it into the air to get people to move aside so he can pass through, creating an absurd distraction. Amid the chaos on the tape, they eventually spot the bank robber in action. When questioned, he explains that he was looking specifically for the safety deposit box containing the PLOT device. Ed then informs Frank that the deposit box had belonged to Simon Davenport, linking the robbery directly to the ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, at Eden Tech, Richard Cain convenes a meeting of other wealthy and influential billionaires. He explains the significance of the PLOT device, revealing that it stands for the primordial law of toughness. Cain describes its power. When activated, the device emits a frequency capable of causing anyone who hears it to become violently aggressive. Cain outlines his plan, called Project Inferno, in which the billionaires will retreat to a secure underground bunker while the rest of the world descends into chaos. The surviving population, having been driven to violence and conflict by the PLOT device, will be culled, and those who remain will be invited to join their so-called New World Order. Cain adds that Weird Al Yankovic will be part of the live entertainment for the event. Frank decides to continue his investigation at Cain's nightclub, the Bengal Club, in search of additional information. While there, he interrogates the bartender, Cody Rhodes, who confirms that Simon had been at the club recently. During the visit, Frank spots Beth Davenport at the club. He uses her presence as a distraction to draw Cain's attention, giving himself an opportunity to investigate further. After engaging in a physical confrontation with a large number of Cain's henchmen, Frank maneuvers his way into the club's security area. While Frank fights and sneaks, Beth performs a bizarre and distracting scat song, keeping Cain occupied. In the security room, Frank examines the club's surveillance footage and uncovers evidence showing Simon meeting with a reporter named Douglas O'Reilly, Vincent Lascoombs. This discovery links Simon's movements to an outside party and provides a new lead in the investigation, giving Frank another piece of the puzzle in uncovering Cain's broader plan. Chief Davis learns of Frank's recent activities and immediately contacts him. She calls him to her home, where she is in bed beside her sleeping husband. Without delay, she informs Frank that due to his reckless behavior and disregard for protocol, he is being suspended for 2 weeks. Following this, Frank returns to his apartment, where Beth Davenport is already waiting for him. The two share a light-hearted conversation, gradually flirting, before deciding to have dinner together. Meanwhile, on a nearby rooftop, Sig Gustafson, now working for Cain, is observing them. Using a thermal lens, he misinterprets everything Frank and Beth do. Every casual gesture, including moments when Frank's dog enters the room, is mistaken by Gustafson for sexual activity, leading to a series of comedic misunderstandings. As time passes, Frank and Beth begin to openly acknowledge their feelings for each other. They take a romantic weekend trip to a snowy cabin, where the isolation allows them to deepen their connection. During the weekend, they perform a dark ritual, which unexpectedly brings a snowman to life. The snowman initially appears playful, but its behavior quickly becomes threatening. While Frank and Beth attempt to manage the situation, the snowman's actions escalate, and it begins attacking them. Beth eventually seizes a sword and decapitates the snowman, neutralizing the threat. Returning to the ongoing investigation, Frank visits Douglas O'Reilly's apartment. Upon entering, he immediately notices highly obvious clues suggesting that O'Reilly has been murdered. Unaware or unconcerned about the setup, Frank proceeds to handle the scene, inadvertently taking the bait that could frame him. While trying to dispose of the evidence, Frank's actions lead to accidentally slicing O'Reilly's head off with a ceiling fan. As Frank attempts to escape, police arrive at the apartment. He flees using his smart car, only to discover that Kane has remotely hacked the vehicle. Kane reveals his intention to kill Frank by driving the car toward certain death. Frank manages to break the windshield to escape, only to encounter a bizarre sequence of obstacles, including a bunch of balloons and bees, followed by two men carrying a replacement windshield that fits perfectly into the car. Finally, using the car's virtual assistant, Clippy, Frank is able to unlock the door and jump to safety, narrowly avoiding death and escaping Kane's trap. Ed contacts Frank with urgent news. He explains that, due to the ongoing investigation into Frank's reckless actions, Police Squad is officially being shut down. To make matters worse, the precinct is being repurposed into a spirit Halloween store. With no choice but to accept the situation, Frank agrees to lay low. He heads over to Beth's home, where she tends to his wounds. In her unique way, she not only bandages the injury but also seasons it like a chicken wing, as if preparing a meal. During this quiet moment, Frank opens up to Beth. He explains how Simon feared that the PLOT device was going to be used for evil purposes, and that this fear likely led to his murder. His words quickly shift, however, as suspicion creeps in. Frank accuses Beth of using him all along, pretending to love him only as a means to advance her own agenda. His frustration escalates into a rant, during which he even brings up her use of his TiVo, angrily claiming she erased his recorded episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Determined to push forward, Frank gets assistance from his fellow detectives and manages to capture Gustafson, placing him in a hospital bed. Using a clever deception, Frank convinces Gustafson that Richard Kane has already been arrested, prompting Gustafson to reveal the details of Kane's master plan. According to his confession, the PLOT device will be activated at midnight on New Year's Eve, but the setup is not what it seems. The entire scenario is revealed to be a Mission Impossible style trap, staged inside a fake room. Detective Barnes had organized this elaborate scheme not only to expose Kane's plan but also to get Frank to admit that he had coerced Gustafson into confessing. As the truth comes out, Barnes reveals that she herself works for Internal Affairs. However, the situation takes another twist. Frank cleverly turns the tables when he gets Barnes to admit that she, too, has used coercion, threatening contractors to make them comply with her demands. With this confession on record, Barnes is the one placed under arrest, leaving Frank cleared of her accusations. Frank attends another major event hosted by Richard Kane, where Kane is preparing to activate the PLOT device before the gathered audience. Frank quickly learns how Kane intends to unleash its power. The dangerous frequency will be broadcast from inside a set of giant balls, scheduled to drop at midnight. In a desperate attempt to stop the plan, Frank climbs inside one of the balls. During the struggle, he loses his pants, accidentally exposing himself to the entire crowd. His antics draw shocked reactions from the guests, but Kane continues with his scheme. At the same time, Beth Davenport sneaks into the event on her own. Determined to avenge the death of her brother Simon, she attempts to strike back against Kane directly. However, her plan fails, and she is quickly captured by Kane's men. When Kane notices Frank's ridiculous display with the ball, he decides to move his timeline forward and activate the device early, before Frank can evacuate the crowd. The consequences are immediate. Across the city, people begin to lose control, turning violent as the frequency overtakes them. On the streets, chaos erupts as civilians begin fighting each other in brutal displays. Frank attempts to hold them off, using unorthodox tactics like ejecting gun magazines at their faces to buy himself time. Realizing he must confront Cain directly, Frank heads after him, but his car refuses to start. At this low moment, Frank sees what he believes to be a sign from his late father, Frank Sr., appearing in the form of an owl. The owl swoops down, lifts Frank, and carries him toward Cain's location so he can continue the fight. As Frank makes his way there, a bizarre moment unfolds. For a brief period, Frank is replaced by Dave Bautista, who takes the stage to deliver a dramatic speech to Cain. However, while Bautista holds everyone's attention, the real Frank slips away to use the bathroom. The distraction doesn't last long. The civilians soon turn their aggression toward Bautista. Finally, Frank and Cain face each other, preparing for a final showdown. But Cain unexpectedly gives up after one punch to the belly from Frank. Attempting to escape, Cain activates a pair of rocket gloves, but the plan backfires, sending him crashing headfirst into a nearby lamp post. Beth, having broken free, approaches Cain once more, still determined to seek vengeance for Simon's death. Frank, however, convinces her to let go of revenge and instead focus on ending the violence. Together, they use the PLOT device to reverse its effects and restore people back to normal. With the chaos finally under control, Cain is arrested, his plan defeated. In the aftermath, Frank and Beth reunite, choosing to resume their relationship as the city begins to recover. During the credits, Chief Davis speaks to reporters at a press conference, announcing that Police Squad is back in operation. She explains that Frank is supposedly under investigation, but in reality, he is enjoying time away at a resort with Beth. Suddenly, the scene becomes stuck in a freeze frame. Everyone and everything halts in place, except for Frank and Beth. Still able to move, the two of them look around, unsettled by what has just happened. Their confusion grows when they notice the existence of the fourth wall, revealing the audience watching them from the other side. Startled but determined, Frank takes action and literally smashes through the fourth wall with his fist, shattering the illusion completely. After the credits, a final gag unfolds. Weird Al Yankovic takes the stage, preparing to perform for the group of evil billionaires. However, he quickly realizes that nobody is there to watch, leaving him visibly annoyed as the film closes.